Jess, thanks so much for taking the time to sit down with me today here at the American Seed Trade Association's show in Chicago. Is this your first time here?
Yes, it is. I'm very excited to be at the event, though.
First, tell me a little bit about Arable.
Yeah, of course. So we started Arable a little over 4 years ago. And the idea is that it's very difficult to get good in-field measurements from remotely sensed data. So satellites, drones, they're good, but if you want to build hyper-accurate crop models and weather forecasts, you really need to take measurements from in the fields. And so from that thesis, we looked at how to design a device that was super easy to ship anywhere in the world, install in less than 5 minutes, and would have accurate and reliable data consistently for farmers.
Mm-hmm. So those were the parameters that were put around the design or kind of the build out in terms of if we have a product, it has to meet these specs. But what are we actually measuring when it goes in the field?
Oh, that's a great question. So the idea is that farmers, they need information about where they are in their phenological cycle. So what growth stage the crop is at to inform activities in the field. They need to know the weather for spraying fungicides, herbicides, other crop protection strategies. They need to know the water stress of the plant, when it last rained, when it's going to rain next. They need to know information about the transpiration or the evapotranspiration of the crop, and also how much water is in the soil. So we make it really easy just to open up your mobile phone, be able to scroll through the different device locations and see all that information and make a determination about what needs to happen in the field.
So you gather all of this data, and then where does it go? Does it go directly to the farmer? Does it go to somebody else to analyze, to create, something that's more intuitive than maybe seeing all of this information? Or how does that exchange happen, and what is the interface like?
Yeah, so that was a big learning from when we released our first product to our second product. Our first product was very data focused, and so we really wanted to explain how we did all the measurements and how we developed all the algorithms. And what we learned from that was that we were giving way too much information to farmers. And so we went back and we looked at the measurements that we were collecting, the accuracy of them, developed a data quality scoring so that we knew that they were reliable enough to make livelihood dependent recommendations upon, and then really updated the system to be more of a red, yellow, green. This is the time when you want to do this. These are the variables you want to think about rather than just an overload of data.
Mm-hmm. And you guys recently had a big announcement in terms of a partnership with BASF. Talk a little bit about that.
We're so excited about that. We've worked with BASF for the past almost 3 years now, doing 2 pilots across Europe, one in Germany and then another one in Germany and France. Within those, we demonstrated how the measurements from our device could feed into the BASF crop models. And they have a team of, I think, 300 agronomists. And so working with them, that the recommendations are super sound. And their whole concept is they want to help farmers understand the exact right time to spray herbicides and fungicides, because it reduces the amount of pesticides that they're putting out in the environment. And also it helps the growers save money and increases the satisfaction with fungicide and pesticide products overall. So it's everybody wins through the partnership. So we're very happy to be part of it.
Fantastic. And so I guess what exactly is that partnership?
Yeah. So the data from the Arable device, when you put it out in your fields, again, to explain the difference, remotely sensed data is very good, but there's a difference in accuracy, especially around solar radiation measurements and precipitation measurements when you use gridded data versus when you actually measure in the field. And so it allows the data to feed into BASF's algorithms and really find the opportune window for when to spray. And it also pulls in more information about the weather so you understand when the spray is going to be most effective.
And how did you come into Arable?
So I have been working with smallholder farmers in Rwanda, and we really struggled with weather data. And especially the year that I was there, the precipitation patterns were off. So you need precipitation to occur at a certain time in the germination process of the seed in order to get the crop. And we were there basically collecting the money back from loans we had given out. And you could just sense the struggle and the difficulty with being able to not produce crops and not having a good understanding of the weather. Most predominantly, precipitation is the hardest to measure and forecast everywhere in the world. And so the way that I met Arable, or found Arable, as I met Adam Wolf, and the device is designed so it measures precipitation acoustically. So the way that you Shazam music, it essentially is listening to rainfall, recording it, and then it determines the drop size distribution and therefore the quantity that has fallen in your field.
That's really cool. So did you study agriculture in school, or how did you make your way into this field and then the technology side of it?
Yeah, no, I have very little background in agriculture. My experience is more in international relations. And so understanding that agriculture is the backbone to a lot of socioeconomic development problems, and the opportunities that if you have a strong data set about how plants are growing or what's going to happen in the future, that you can do some or build some innovative financial tools around credit and insurance risk and really be able to catalyze investment and infrastructure in places where it's most needed in the world.
And maybe what has surprised you most as you've really kind of come into the field? And, you mentioned earlier that you are going out and doing some of the setup and client management. What surprised you the most as you've boots in the field, so to speak?
Coming from smallholder agriculture, I think probably the most eye-opening experience for me was going to Salinas, California, and seeing how much lettuce they grow there. I was blown away. Just the size of the production, and just how controlled and precise the irrigation. I mean, they have perfect weather in that area, Monterey County, but it's always been super impressive.
So, okay, you mentioned that. That's a great point. You're setting these things up for growers in Salinas Valley, and we've talked about measuring irrigation, but what are lettuce growers looking to measure with this device, and how is it helping their operations?
Lettuce growers, I mean, it's a very challenging job because the turn is so quick. It's often between 28 and 42 days that they're producing a crop. And so just being able to understand where they are in the stage for procurement and pricing decisions is where it becomes most relevant.
Is there anything else that you'd like to discuss?
I guess I could talk a little bit about, we're working with a couple of seed breeding companies, and we're very excited about that opportunity just because our device collects so much data. And what I think is important is that it really helps the breeders be able to understand where different varieties are going to perform well in different environments. And from a farmer selecting seeds, there's a huge amount of risk and uncertainty that they're taking on, and they want to know that they're going to have a good outcome at the end of the year. And so how do you reduce risk from that system is by helping them understand that this is going to perform well, especially with changes in climate and changes in temperature and rainfall. Knowing ahead of time that they're going to be successful is good for the seed company and also good for the farmer.
And would you say that's more kind of exploratory in terms of how seed companies can use it, or more kind of partnering to break into that market more?
It's an interesting question because seed companies, their data is their product. And so it's a little bit more sensitive in how we work with them. And they often have huge platforms where they're already amassing genotypical and phenotypical data. And so for us, it's really setting up a system where we can have an API that completely feeds into that database and often layers on what they're collecting manually already in the field and gives them additional evidence to make that trait selection.
Fantastic. Well, I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me and share more about Arable and who you are and your background and what you guys have been working on for the last 4 or 5 years.
Yeah, thank you so much for having me, Julie. It was a pleasure.
All right. Well, I hope you have a good show, Jess.
Thanks.